Welcome to the Adventure to Evolve podcast, your conscious playground. Here, we explore leadership strategies to lead the most incredible adventure of your lifetime, your story. I'm Shalia Stafford, your host, an ex-corporate sales leader turned podcast host, keynote speaker, and entrepreneur. Using leadership strategies, I'm guiding you to lead all the awkward, uncomfortable, heart-beating, palm sweating experiences that serve your growth and make your 80-year-old self proud without the corporate jargon. In this chapter of your life, what experiences are calling you to explore every layer of who you are? If that is your truth, I triple dog dare you to dive in, guided by the wisdom of your divine essence. If you like what you hear and want to go deeper into your adventure, join our online course at goflipthescript.com. Welcome back, everyone. This is Shalia, and I am so thrilled to be here with you in a new kind of way, stretching my comfort zone. I have to admit that because we are now on video, but more than anything, to be here joined with Andre. Andre, who is a very dear friend of mine and has actually been on the podcast before. And Andre is a formal mechanical engineer turned leadership expert who now is an entrepreneur helping influence the mindset and the impact that workforces are creating all across the nation. And that is actually how our story came to be. When I was choosing to look at my next chapter in life and I was thinking about what I wanted to do, very much like Andre's story, I decided to leave the safety of my career and what I had made of it to jump in further into the world of leadership development because we share a passion for what that looks like and the impact that we feel that it can create in our world. And now, more than ever, in today's world, it almost feels like we're waking up to a new world where we're experiencing so many new challenges and we're hearing so much negativity in the media, and some of which is true to the reality of the challenges that we are facing as a society in our world and in the workplace, and then how that trickles back down into our experience and what we are creating in our stories. And so Andre is here to share some of his insights on how he looks at the challenges that we are facing and to share some of his optimistic ideas about how to move forward with these challenges so that we can continue to make a positive impact, not just within the teams that we're leading, but within our own personal stories and what that looks like. So Andre, thank you so much for being here.
It is my pleasure. I'm so glad to be back. I'm so glad to be on video, or however we end up putting this out there to the world. It's great to see you again. I know we've had several conversations since then, and I'm really looking forward to this one.
I'm excited that people are going to be able to hear more about your journey and get to experience just this dose of inspiration that you truly are. And you live it, you breathe it. It's part of your personal values, your business values. So I'm excited to get into what's going to be a raw conversation. Andre and I will have conversations from time to time, and we'll reflect on where the state of leadership is and how it impacts us and what we're seeing and what we're feeling. And we just want to explore it. We invite you to join the conversation. If anything that we say here today inspires you, let us know. Before we jump into that, Andre, I do want to open it up. For those of you who do not know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure, happy to. So I'm an engineer, as you mentioned, mechanical, that used to work on products that now I like to think of myself as an engineer that is a people engineer, and now from products to people. Because when I got into leadership development, I realized that I was not able to let that part of my brain go. And that part of my brain is one that wants to understand the system of like why things are the way they are. So engineers, what they do, we take math and science and then we apply it. And you apply what you understand about the basics of math and science to problems in the world and come up with solutions. So the exact same thing is with people. But what I find is so fascinating is the human system is so interesting and so complicated that once you really start to peel back the onion, you realize that it is a complicated system, but it also has some very simple, fundamental things that most of us walk through our entire lives not really knowing, but we're supposed to be experts at being people. And so what I love to do and what I do now is I work with companies and I help their managers become better leaders. I like to think of managing and leading as two different things. Managing is extremely important. Managing is how you put a plan together. It's how you execute the plan. It's how you structure. A lot of the thoughts that come for me with managing is a subject matter expertise in an accounting or in a human resources or engineering, whatever it is. And then you have to be able to manage that process because you're an expert in that. And then you manage people with that same expertise. But what ends up happening is that same expertise that you use to manage that process when you were an individual contributor, now you're in a management position and you're expected to lead. And some of the things that you were doing as a manager of the process, now you try to apply that to people and it just doesn't work. People want to be inspired. People want to feel connected. People want to feel like they belong. And that's just not a part of what we learn as engineers and technical people in management. And so my role is to come in and say, hey, everyone, here is this idea of the management and leader, and you need both. We focused a lot on management to this point. Let's spend some time focused on the leadership side. And it's really interesting to see how there's a stark difference between the two, but how they also really complement each other.
You mentioned that it's so complex, but yet so simple. And I know that when I go to conferences or seminars, or I'm listening to people who I really align with in their work and the way that they engage in that work, my head is like a bobblehead. I am going, right? And so it's probably not the best earrings to have right now to show that demonstration. However, it is so true. It is so complex and multifaceted, but yet when you get to the core of it, it is simple. But do you think that it could be because we don't have a good understanding of the simplicity around it? How do you view the complexity and the simplicity of what that looks like?
Yeah, great question. So I think of the simplicity as simple as a statement of we all want to feel good. If you really look at everything that is happening in anyone's given day, we're trying to have an experience in this day, in this week, in this month, in this year, in this life that feels good. And that is the simplicity. The complexity comes into play when you look at how does someone pursue that good feeling. There's different ways to pursue it. And sometimes we can pursue it in healthy ways. Sometimes we can pursue it in unhealthy ways. Sometimes we can pursue it in ways that make us happy, make us feel good, but there's a damage that's happening to the people around us, which then has a spiral or a slingshot effect comes back to you. And so the complexity comes in how do you navigate the world and the people in it, especially the people, and maximize your good feeling while also creating an environment for everyone else to feel good. I know that sounds vague. Let me give an example. So first, for yourself, everyone wants to feel fit, right? Everyone wants to be healthy. And does that mean if eating the things that we like that make us feel good while we eat it made us healthy, wouldn't that be the simplest form of life, right? Don't you wish donuts and espresso? I'm a chocolate guy. So if like Mr. Good bars and peanut M&Ms and Hershey's just regular candy bars were like 6-pack superfoods, everything would be perfect. Everything would be so simple. But the reality is, in order to feel good, to be healthy, we have to do some things that don't feel good in the moment. And we have what they call delayed gratification. And so when we're pursuing this desire to feel good, so a lot of times you just want to sit and watch Netflix for 2, 3 days, 4 days a week and eat popcorn and put M&Ms in the popcorn and drink Coca-Cola. And that's it feels good. It feels great. But if we do that for an extended period of time, we're ultimately not going to be feeling good. So that's an example of the complexity, just in a day-to-day, really simple example of how we walk through and manage this thing called life that has these contradictions, if you will. So the thing feels good now, but it's going to make us feel bad later. So we're all trying to navigate that in any given moment and create the best life experience that we can.
What are you curious about right now in terms of feeling good when it comes to the not so good feeling of what we are experiencing right now in our world with a lot of the challenges that we're seeing in the media?
Oh, wow. Good question. So I'm curious about There's so many things. I'm really fascinated with the integration of business, capitalism, and wellness and just people well-being. I'm of the belief that they don't have to be on two different paths. In other words, you can create a business environment that is extremely successful financially, and it also, on average, has an amazing culture and people feel great working there. And I think it can seem like you have to choose one or the other. Like we're just focused on quarterly profits so we can say what we need to say to the street. We don't care about anything else. There's this sort of corporate mindset. And the idea that some have is that companies don't care about people. We see the layoffs that are happening recently. There's always, at least in my lifetime, been this sort of stigma around corporate and greed and bad. And then there's the good are the nonprofits, the good academia and education. And I don't think that you have to separate the two. And what's so interesting to me, I find it so ironic, is we treat businesses, companies, like they're this entity. And sometimes it can be the man or they're doing these things. And we forget that they're just people. Every company is just a group of people. And so what happens is that group of people at the top run that organization and they create a culture and they get to decide what that culture can be. So what I'm fascinated with right now is I see what's happening with ESG and I see some of the pushback on that's happening, and not to get into politics, but some politics want ESG, some politics don't. And I'm fascinated and curious at how we create that win-win, the win for the employee, the win for the shareholder, the win for the supplier, the win for the customer, of course, the win for the community, the win for society as a whole. So I'm curious at finding not just like the concept of that, because the purpose of a corporation, a group of 183 CEOs got together, some of the largest companies in 2019, and they redefined the purpose of a corporation. And they said, it's not just for the shareholders, it's not just for profits, it's for all. It's for those stakeholders that I just mentioned. And so I think we've started down that path, but I think there's more opportunity to find very specific examples of where we're able to do good and do well at the same time. So I'm curious to find as many of those examples to just prove that, because I believe in my heart that's true.
So you obviously have had your own personal experience as an employee in your career journey, and then you transitioned into leading teams as well. And now you're seeing an even bigger picture of it as you're working with some of the most purpose-driven organizations to position their workforces for success as well. You experience work differently as an employee, as a manager, and then being able to drive the vision as a CEO. What does that look like for each individual stage? How do you think we are all experiencing it differently, if at all? We're in the aftermath of the pandemic, and that's a collective challenge that we experience globally. We all went through that together. Now we're seeing inflation. We're seeing job losses happening. AI is coming in to threaten sometimes what it can feel like the security of our jobs. What do you think each of those stages are feeling, or each of those phases? And is it any different at all?
Another great question. I think about those phases because I talk to people in each level of an organization, and I get fascinated. Sometimes it's just so interesting to be on the outside, just talking to different groups because you think trends. So a trend that I see, employees generally, and we see all the data that says how people feel about being at work. They're disengaged, like all these things that we've seen for years. And it seems like it's gotten a little bit worse here recently. So it's not a surprise to hear that employees are saying that they're disengaged or that they may not appreciate people that they work with, certain people, their manager, perhaps. Managers, let me jump from employee. Let me not go to manager. Let me go to senior leader. Senior leaders are thinking about the big picture and making sure that the company continues to excel. And that's a big strategic focus in how to create an environment that everyone wants to be a part of. And at the same time, making sure that they're continuing to grow themselves. the folks in the middle, when I just put a big bucket of middle management between the employees and the senior leadership, those folks are, in my opinion, some of the forgotten and expected to do both what the employee does and what the senior leader does. I feel like they have expectations from the employees of developing them, creating a great environment, shielding them from things, and then their expectations from senior leadership down to them that they have to basically take whatever the company line is and carry it forward and execute it. And they get pressure from both and they're squeezed in the middle. And the thing that really got me about leadership development over the course of my career was I didn't see enough of how do we help that manager first just deal with the stress that they're having, right? So there's always been, I've seen this focus on that once you're in management, you need to build trust with your team. You need to be transparent. You need to do everything that is expected of a servant leader for the organization. So there's all these things that are set and put on that manager that they're supposed to just magically, because they got the promotion and they're in a position, be able to do. And what I found was there wasn't enough of how do you help that manager first figure out how to make themselves feel whole. They're under stress too. They've been through a pandemic too. They're dealing with things at home and things at work, and sometimes even more so than everyone around them. So they're in the middle being squeezed. And I think what we need to do more of, and this is what we do with our firm, is we give the managers the tools first for themselves. So you can't give what you don't have. You're supposed to show up and be empathetic. You're supposed to show up and be this amazing human being for everyone around you. But what about you, the manager? Who's taking care of you? And I think that there's an opportunity to really dig into supporting our managers in helping them first feel whole themselves, helping them ignite their own passion, if you will, so that they can take that and inspire the people around them.
It makes me think about our roles that we have in every dynamic of our lives. Just like managers going into their careers, there isn't necessarily a survival guide on how to take theory into reality. It's one thing to take theory and make it reality, but then it's how do we assess ourselves against the measure of what we hold ourselves to, and how do we get feedback? A lot of it comes in experiential experiences. One of the most important teams that you have is your family. And so on a personal experience, bringing it back to what it was like for you, coming out of the pandemic and then the snowball effect of everything that came from that. There isn't a survival guide for us either on how do we take all of these leadership skills that we need to have and put into play so that we can impact the players that matter most to us and to be able to move forward even in the face of challenge and uncertainty and to make something of it. But it doesn't work out so linear, right? In the moment when all of this was happening, and I want to take you back to it, back to the pandemic, the moment it hits your subconscious, the part of you that doesn't have the logical components in place yet to make sense of it in a way that we want to, the part of you that just feels it at its rawest state. What was that like for you? And take me through the journey of how you moved it from that subconscious, raw state of feeling it and bringing it to the consciousness so that you could harness that to focus you on what matters and what it taught you.
Wow. Great question. I think back to 2020, there were so many things that happened that year. I remember the first thing for me personally, and I just quickly walk through it. When we lost Kobe Bryant, I remember when I saw the news flash, and it was one of those like that's just not true. There's no possible way. It makes absolutely no sense that this could happen. And I remember once it settled in that like, this is real. And then we started getting more details about it. And his daughters with them. The details I want to go back through, but that was early 2020. That was big gut punch. I'm a father of a daughter, like all of those emotions and just the feeling of kind of helplessness in a situation that could happen to any of us was the start. And then, of course, we get to the pandemic. I remember my first realization that something is getting serious was when they canceled an NBA game. And that's not giving two basketball things. I'm actually a more football person than basketball, but it was that time of year. And it was like, wow, okay, this has never happened before. This is unheard of. The focus became, how do I make sure my family's okay? How do I protect, as the husband and father, how do I protect my wife and my children? And the thing to do was just stay home. So we did that, and we thought that would keep things safe, and they did from a health perspective. But what we didn't see coming from a societal perspective was the murder of George Floyd, which happened, and we were all at home, able to watch it literally live, not live, but watch the video in full without distraction. So that was a visceral experience for me personally. And then before the end of the year, just a couple months after George Floyd, we lost Chadwick Boseman, who, in my opinion, in his role in Black Panther, which was so transformational for me, and I had my son watch that movie after he passed. And what's interesting is my son watched it on a Saturday night, and the next day he wanted to watch it again. And first of all, that Saturday, he had never watched the whole movie. He was at the age where he hadn't watched the whole movie yet. And the Sunday he wanted to watch it again. The Monday he wanted to watch it again. The Tuesday he wanted to watch it again. We watched it for 3 weeks straight. Every night he wanted to watch that movie. And it, in my opinion, was 100% representation. He saw himself as a superhero that he had not seen before. So that was a pretty incredible set of circumstances that I had no idea what happened. And so as the year unfolded and all these things, it created this uneasiness, this vulnerability, we really especially don't have control over anything that happens. And all we can do is just try to show up and do our best. And it actually, if I were to say a gift from it, it forced me to find some tools that I now use to help me move out of that space. And these are the same tools that I later realized are the perfect thing for leaders to use to navigate having to do everything that I just mentioned. That year was tough. Obviously, it was for everyone for different reasons. I know so many people, lost family members, lost friends. And it was also, I think it plays in this still undertone of negativity, this undertone of concern, of uncertainty that is still, especially in the country today, and I believe in the world as well.
I have goosebumps going through that experience with you. Thank you for sharing. I felt that I walked through that with you, and it breaks my heart to think about just all of the different dynamics of life that come into focus and hurt. They hurt, but through that hurt, we find inspiration. Your son find an inspiration through the loss of somebody who has impacted his life and many other lives. It was a fantastic movie, and I can only imagine you sitting there watching your sweet baby boy just soak in that magic and just have him feel the idea of the inspiration for what he can do and the power inside of him. And that's beautiful as a parent. And then as a father, that gut punch feeling that you had and having to experience, to think about how am I going to protect my family and what I need to do. And the denial that came before that, maybe this isn't really what it is. Maybe it'll be better. But then a signal happens that tells you, okay, this is serious. It's time to adjust. It's time to focus. And it's time to see how do we get through this. And I think for many of the managers that are out there, and you've managed people for a long time in your career as well, you have decades of experience. Throughout my entire career, I've been blessed to have the opportunity to lead teams. And I know primarily working in startup and turnaround environments that are also going through realignments, that environment feels challenging. You are building planes while you're flying it. It's complex and shifting, and you are worried about your people. You are hoping in some sense that there is a form of denial in there that maybe these things aren't true, but somewhere inside of us, we have that fear, that gut punch that if it is, we need to prepare and we need to focus. Taking you back into your time too as a manager, I want to center you there with that experience. How can managers who are in that position today in purpose-driven organizations who are trying to do their best in the face of some of the adversities that we're going through, how can they ground themselves who they too are feeling very similar and are thinking about what's going to happen to their teams, how to inspire them and how to focus them? Tell me what you're seeing and hearing in your experience.
Yeah, another great question. So the day-to-day is challenging. The day-to-day for most is nonstop meetings. If they're remote, it's on a Zoom, and there's a different energy that you have to show up with to be on camera, on computer. There's the integration of work now in home that wasn't there before. So there's a nonstop that creates accelerated burnout, I believe. There's trying to figure out what to do next, how to manage the new work environment, whether we go back in office or not go back in office. And having a team now that maybe you haven't even met in person before, which is a new thing for many people. So what I'm finding I'm working and our team is working to help these managers do, there's a couple of elements to it. One is there's a concept called positive intelligence that is extremely helpful just to give you a tool set to manage your mental and emotional journey on a daily basis. So think of that as a foundational way to go out and till the soil, if you will, of your brain to create an environment that you can be inspired. And then for the manager, it is how do you inspire yourself? What inspires you? Gen Z and millennials as a generation have done something that I'm so proud of that they're doing, and they're demanding an experience at work that is meaningful to them. And what can be a challenge if you're of an older generation is that was not a part of work before.
No.
That was, if you're at a great company, you get at least a vision, mission, and values, and that gets flowed down and everyone gets on board, and that's it. Now it is the employee saying, okay, that's great, but how does that relate to me? What about what I care about? Is the company going to put resources behind the things that are important to me, the causes that are important to me? Does the company care about me as a person, or am I just a number? I think what the pandemic did is it heightened our need for connection. And so people are looking for connection everywhere. And one of the places we spend most of our waking hours there is work. So for managers, there is a way, and this is what I want to help people realize. Just because we haven't thought about things like our purpose and our why at work does not mean that we can't learn how to. And it also doesn't mean that if we start to, there's this big risk that we're going to realize that, oh, we really want to do what we were thinking about when we were a kid, what we dreamed about. And now we have this dilemma because we're in this career that we don't want to be in. Like that is not how it has to happen. What can happen, and this is the journey that we take people through, is you are asked some questions, you do some reflection, you are just presented life and work in a different way, and you do some introspection, and you realize that everything that you've done up to this point has prepared you for whatever the thing is that's next. And a lot of the times the thing that's next is right there at the company that you're at, doing the same thing that you're doing, or maybe doing a little bit more of it or doing something slightly different. And so I mention that because I feel like there's this sort of unknown scariness of, wow, how do I as a manager even think about bringing my purpose to work? But until you do it, the people that work for you won't be able to do it. So
isn't that a reality?
It is. So you say that these employees want this and we're trying to figure out how to give it to them, but we have to do it ourselves first. Like that's how it works. We can't literally, again, I'll say, give what we don't have. So by doing, and take that, let me say this as a caveat. You're talking to a guy that hated analyzing himself.
Did you really?
engineered, left brain.
I could see
Get
that.
the emotional stuff away from me. I don't want to talk about emotions. If we do talk about emotions, we'll talk about your emotions. I don't want to talk about
That's
my emotions
hilarious.
and what I'm dealing with and really think about no. So I was actually comfortable with all the stuff I was saying earlier about like how you come in and you focus as a leader just on serving other people and all that. I was good with that because I didn't want to deal with my stuff. But what's amazing is once you start to just take some time, and it's not really hard work, but it is work that takes time and intentionality. Once you do that, you realize you have this inspiration. You've been on this journey. You're on a path. Purpose is a direction. It's not a destination. And now you have that you can use to lead and inspire the people around you by not saying, hey, this is the company mission, get on board, by saying, hey, this is the company mission, vision, values. What do you care about? And how does it align? Which is a completely different conversation.
Okay, so when I hear you saying all of this and I think about my experience when I was leading teams, and I agree with everything that you are saying, and we have to start within ourselves first so that our team can follow. That concept rings true even as parents, right? Whatever it is we want our kids to embody, no matter how much we try to teach them, it's what we do that they will actually learn from. And we have to face it at the core. However, I think about my time managing, and I think the more complex things get, the more it can distract us into thinking that what we need to do is be more busy, focus more on the outcomes that we need to drive to make sure that we can be safe. Safe meaning job security, safe meaning that we are reaching the goals instead of, hey, let's slow down and create a space to hone back in on the focus, right? That core focus that we all need. So how can companies create that space for managers to slow down and focus on that big perspective so that they can then instill that to their team and in essence, give them the fuel that they need to continue the journey when we just want to stay busy?
Right. And we feel like if we're not busy, then we're not being productive. We're not doing what we're supposed to do. And then that causes anxiety and on, right? And then next thing you know, we're burnt
Right.
out and we can't go anymore and we have to take a break, or our body does something to us where it takes us out for a while. I think about just how many minutes we have in a day, and what everyone is doing is trying to maximize those minutes. And that caused me, is I was thinking about for my own life, how to get it all done. I came up with a framework for it that I just started using for me just to figure it out. I was literally just struggling, trying to figure out how do I do life? And I'm so busy, but I don't feel like I'm necessarily getting where I want to go. And the concept is called the 1440 method. And the idea is you think about there's 1,440 minutes in any day, which there are in 24 hours. And then the question is, how many of those minutes do you feel you are intentionally creating the life that you really want, as opposed to just spinning your wheels or possibly staying still? And most people, when asked that question, if they haven't thought about it before, it's usually a pretty low percentage, like 20, 30% of actually intentionally create. A lot of people feel like, yeah, we're doing what we have to do because we have these responsibilities and we have these things that we've just signed up to do. And once you start with that question and people realize that their score is low, and then you realize, how many 1440s do I have left? How many days do we have on Earth? And there's math in all this. You can figure all this out, and how much of your waking hours you spend doing different things. And so what it does is it causes people to stop. And this is what companies can do if they bring this tool set in. Now, it doesn't have to be this tool set, but something that gives people the permission to stop and think about what's important to them and what their priorities are, and how everything that they're doing fits into those priorities. Because once you take that moment and you pause and you look at your life and you look at the areas that are important, so you look at work, you look at if you're doing things in the community, you look at your faith, you look at your health, you look at your family, you look at fun, your friendships, whatever it is, and you realize that these are the things, and there's a framework that says these are the things, these are the foundations. And then you set a vision for each one of those, a vision for each one of those things of what you want to create and the kind of life you want to have in each of those areas. Now you have a framework to say, okay, I'm going to set goals in all these areas. And then I'm going to make sure that my daily actions are supporting these goals. And ultimately, every year, I'm moving closer and closer to the life that I want. So it's a really simple process. It takes a little bit of time. It takes some reflection. It takes someone to guide you through, or you work with someone, or you could do it on your own. But just the idea is that you have to pause, reflect, prioritize, and then realize that it's just a handful of buckets, and everything that you're doing is trying to help you move towards some vision. The final thing I'll say about it, and I realized this after doing this process for a couple of years, because it was all about the goals. I want to achieve the goals. I set them trying to get to the vision. Oh, I would have scored myself on my goals. How did I do in all the areas? I'm like, if I'm evaluating my performance at work, why don't I evaluate my performance in life? So I'm going to set my goals and I'm going to give myself red, yellow, green and all this. And after a couple of years, I realized that the whole point of it, the absolute 100% whole point of the exercise was to enjoy the journey.
Yes.
It was to now have a direction. I know I'm doing things that are moving me where I want to go. But the main thing is, are those things that I enjoy? And how can I make them more enjoyable? That became the primary focus.
So getting into the present moment, because what goals do, they're excellent and necessary. They do give us something tangible to focus on, but it focuses on the doing. And doing doesn't always work out in a straight formula. Sometimes you don't get the results that you want. And then sometimes that can create a gap where it can lead us to feel like we're failures or we're not good enough or we're missing the point, as opposed to focus on the being aspect. Who do we want to be regardless of the outcome of the goals so that we can strive to do better? Obviously, the goal is to hit the outcome, to strive above and beyond. But even when we don't, it gives us an opportunity for reflection and to harness those reflections for growth. But we have to have the reflection. And here's the thing. No matter how busy I think I am, even in the times when in my career when I was leading teams, every time I felt that we don't have the luxury of pausing to go do this workshop or to go to this seminar or to listen to this conference. And I didn't want to. I really could be doing something else, right? And dragged myself, knowing somewhere inside of me that at the end of the day, I always walked away with something, one nugget, even if it was said in the same way 100 times, that just changed the perspective and how I engaged with what was in front of me. And I think that a big part of that, you mentioned being able to pause and to reflect so that we can focus on the big goals and what we can do differently. How often, as a manager, do you think we should be taking that time to pause and reflect on the goals so that we can look at that big picture? And more importantly, so double whammy with a few questions all in one here for you. We're leading not just the goals, but the experience of our people. Goals can feel more tangible. Experiences are more intangible. And not only that, but then you have a team of X amount of people who all want different experiences that may not always be the same. How do you manage the goals and the experience while also making sure that you're taking time out in a calendar year so that you can pause and reflect and look at that big picture, and how often? So I think 4 questions was that all in one. No pressure, but just remember them all, okay?
Let me give you one just quick, succinct answer. Wow, what would it be to answer all 4 in one just statement? Don't have it. Plan. Of course, like the old school way would be just plan and execute, Shalia. You just put the plan together and then you execute it. It's that simple. But no, what you're asking are some very good detailed questions, and it's the execution of that. And what I have found, it's interesting because a lot of people will have a vision board. A lot of people will do that periodically. You might do that once a year. You might do that every few years. You might do it once a lifetime. There's also goal setting. A lot of people do at least annually. What I'm finding is the check-ins. So however long you set the goal, the intention for, whether it's a vision for life or it's a goal for the year, it's the check-ins that become the most valuable, in my opinion, in the frequency of those. So by check-ins, a check-in quarterly for some, or a check-in monthly for others. I think weekly to some extent, but monthly you get enough data to be able to sit back and reflect and look at what has happened and determine if you need to make adjustments. So if you have a year-long goal, break it down into what you want to do each quarter, and at least each quarter sit down and see how you're doing. Now, that is, I think, really helpful if you are trying to go to Los Angeles and you want to make sure you get there, you set the direction to go towards Los Angeles, right? And that's what I'm talking about with coming up with these goals, and now you set the direction. But now the part becomes, if we're going to go to Los Angeles, I live in Maryland, how are we going to get there? And there's multiple ways to get to Los Angeles. I could catch a train to Los Angeles. I could catch a flight to Los Angeles. I could drive to Los Angeles. And this is where we're talking about the experience. So you really can give yourself license to choose the experience you want. Some people want a flight because they want to get there fast because they have some stuff they want to do, when they're there. Some people want a flight and they want to be in first class because it's a long flight. So they're willing to pay a little bit extra money. Some people want to be in a train with sleeper cars and go with a group. Some people want to be in a car where you can stop in multiple cities and truly experience America
I do.
along the way. So decide, once the goal is set, the direction, decide how you want to really be intentional about deciding the how. And
Is the
even
how
more
the values?
The how, exactly. The how are connected to your values. They're connected to what's important to you on this journey. So one of my values is growth, for example. So I may want to, on the way, stop, and if there's some interesting places to learn some things, I want to go learn some things, or I may want to go talk to some people and try to help them learn or grow from them. So values absolutely are connected to the how. And the thing that I don't hear enough is the who. Who do you want to go on this ride with? You don't want to go alone. I guarantee that. Different people give us different energy. Different people make us feel different ways in different situations. So being very intentional with who you're surrounding yourself with in any given part of your journey, I think is a thing that sometimes we just leave the chance. But if we add some intentionality to it, oh my goodness, it can make it so much more enjoyable.
The values aspect, touching on that is such an important aspect. It's funny because you mentioned growth and you gave me a different interpretation. In my mind, when you said, when we're traveling and we stop somewhere and I value growth, and I thought, jump off a plane? I would want to jump off a plane. And you're like, we're going to go to a museum and learn something. And it goes to show how important it is to take those times to pause and reflect, to really define, what do values mean to us in action? Mm-hmm. What do they look like when they're challenged? What do they look like when we are creating false signals that justify and put us on the wrong path against our values so that we can bring ourselves back closer to the right vehicle, the right way to get there, and with the right people?
Yeah. I love the values conversation. Values, to me, there's a few things that I think about. One, companies have them. Usually they're written somewhere, and there's an assumption that everyone knows what they mean, mm-hmm. and that they mean the same thing to everyone. I have found that everyone has different interpretations. You can say innovation, you can say respect, you can say all these words, but different people interpret things differently, right? Respect to one person may, stay away from me. Respect to another person may mean, make sure you come to me and ask me for things. So the idea that values are just as simple as you say them and they exist, I find fascinating because there's more to it than that. The other thing that I talk about a lot is we have an organization's values and we want everyone to align to them. And this is how you show up when you're here. But everyone has their own individual values too. And I think there's a missed opportunity with not understanding each person's values that you lead. Why not take them through an exercise where they define their values? After you've done it for yourself, it's okay if they're not the exact same values as the company. That's not what's going to happen. That doesn't mean that you can't stay at the company and still live by the company's way of doing things. That just means there's things within what you do at that company that may be more important to you than other things. And the more you understand that, the more fulfillment you get out of work.
And speaking of fulfillment, on the other side of fulfillment is, what if the worst case scenarios of everything that we feel comes true? And so right now, with the facing threats of layoffs and everything that we're hearing, how can we help those who are in the workforce position themselves to be able to move through the challenges if that becomes a reality for themselves? And how can managers help their workforce?
Yeah, and I know this is a very real concern. There's the idea of staying optimistic and staying positive, but there's also the idea of being realistic and paying attention to what's going on, not so that you allow it to impact you negatively. Negative news doesn't have to impact you negatively. You can take that information and turn it into a gift. And so that's the way I like to look at any situation. There's a potential gift in it. So if you're in the workforce, manager or employee, and you're concerned right now, I think if you haven't, this is a beautiful time to do that pause and reflection and prioritize that we discussed. Because even if you feel like you're too busy, if you take the time to do that, you will position yourself for no matter what happens, you know what direction you want to go in. And you're very clear on that direction. So if something happens at work and you find out that you're no longer going to be working there, once you've done this reflection and you're connected to purpose and meaning and everything that you do, then it just becomes, okay, I'm not going to do that here anymore, but I know what it is I'm going to be doing. I'm just going to figure out where I'm going to do it next. And because I'm so connected and so passionate about it, I'm going to be absolutely great at it, as opposed to just doing a job to make money. So you position yourself for what's happening by connecting to what's most important to you about the work that you do and the impact that you want to make. Take the time to figure that out right now so that no matter what happens, you're going to continue to head in that direction. And then things just have a way of working out once you have that clarity. It's amazing once you have it.
That's so true. It's a component that we need to do in our lives as well, so that we can fuse the energy of what comes from both of those areas professionally and personally, because we'll find that there is a lot of synergy between the two. They go hand in hand, even through the challenges, even when the outcomes don't come out the way that we want it to, even when things go wrong, we can find ways to harness it for growth. And a big component of that is that pause and reflect that you say, to not only do it in the context of our work lives, but to do it in our personal lives, because they only can work powerfully when they're combined together. I keep thinking about the need for companies who are leading teams to create that space to pause and reflect. How can that help with the burnout issues that we're seeing in professionals?
Yeah, something that'll happen when someone really pauses and reflects and thinks about all the things that are important to them, they'll realize which of those things that they're doing currently are energizing them versus de-energizing, versus just completely taking their energy away. Burnout happens when we do too much of things that do not energize us. And I'm not saying that to say if you're connected to your purpose and your meaning at work and you go to work all day and you're doing that, you're not going to be tired. You're not going to be exhausted, potentially burned out. I'm not saying that to say that. I'm saying when you look at everything and you think about your priorities, you will realize that there are things that you need to do to re-energize yourself, and you'll build that into your system. So an example of that for me, I look at how I spend my days and who I spend my days with, how much time I spend with family, how much time I spend with work, with clients, how much time I spend with my friends. My friend time is extremely important for recharging. My family time is extremely important for recharging. But those are two different types of batteries. Those are two different types of re-energizing experiences. But I treat them just as important as my work, as my career, as what I feel like now my calling is to do this work, purpose-driven leadership. So once you pause and you look at the full picture, what happens is it takes care of burnout because it forces you to say, you know what? I need more vacations. Or you know what? I need to spend at least one day a week where I spend half of the day, I block my calendar and I do absolutely nothing but whatever it is that I want to do. You know what? I need to go get massages more. Or you know what? I'm not talking to my best friends as much. I need to go hang out with them a little bit more. All of that will come with the intention. And it really helps because the way I think of it is with burnout is we're trying to go, we're going. And it's amazing what you can do when you recharge. These phones, they're fine until the battery dies, but then you just plug them in. So we just need more plug-in time. We just need to make sure we know what re-energizes us, what's our plug, what's our battery, and then just make sure we're plugging into the battery every night. Like we put our phone on a charger, which I guess we don't do that anymore because it ruins the battery. You can't leave it. So you have to know like how much time to recharge and who re-energizes you and how sometimes it's just by yourself. Whatever it is, the re-energizing gets built into the priority.
Well, Andre, as we begin to wrap up the episode, we'd love to have our guest experts leave our audience with a challenge that's going to help them create alignment with their authentic story and help them take the time to do whatever it is that is necessary to have that opportunity to pause and reflect. Based on our conversation today, what challenge would you give our audience that will help them get a better understanding of what their values are, the journey that they're on, and how to make an impact with their teams for managers that are leading teams, the senior leaders who are leading the big vision, and then when it just comes back down to that raw human experience of leading our lives?
I think my challenge, I try to think of something different, but it keeps coming back in my mind as you're talking to this. If you haven't, to make the time to pause and prioritize. That is the challenge. If you haven't, if you have been too busy, if there are just so many things going on that you can't even imagine being able to do that, then this especially applies to you. And do it in a way that is productive. So go online, talk to your friends, find a process for it. Find a framework or methodology that you think will help you the most and use that methodology to pause and prioritize. And you'll be amazed at how much the clarity will give you peace and energy. So that's my challenge.
Andre, how can our listeners get in contact with you?
Oh, yeah. Contact. So we are at whitmanconsulting.com. It takes you to Consult Whitman as the website, but if you type in whitmanconsulting.com, it gets there. We're on Instagram, not as active as I'd like to be, but at Whitman Consulting on Instagram. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Andre Thornton, Andre W. Thornton. There's a baseball player that's named Andre Thornton that's still out there doing amazing things. And email, if anyone wants to email me directly, I'm happy to share that, athornton@consultwhitman.com. And if there's anything I can do to support anyone, feel free to reach out. And we have a team here that's ready to help and willing to serve. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Shalia, to connect with your audience today.
I'm curious to hear now, after the conversation, what's your outlook for what's ahead of us?
Oh, my goodness. There's so much uncertainty. I've stopped trying to predict. It seems like every prediction, I haven't heard one that's gone right yet. There's always been, oh, the job market's going to do this, or the economy's going to do that, or the pandemic is going to do this or that. And it seems like we've been, for the last 3 years, in constant surprise. So my outlook is no matter what happens, it can be turned into a gift. And with that mindset, it really doesn't matter what happens, because you can always find something that you can get out of it that continues to move you in a direction of your purpose. And that's the beauty, again, of having the clarity.
There aren't many guarantees in life, but one of those are that we will experience challenges. And when we do, it's more important than ever that we are connected with our authentic story and in alignment with the experiences that serve our growth, allow us to engage our comfort zone, fuel our perspective, and then be able to move forward in the adventure as it always will continue. Andre, thank you so much for joining us here today. It has been such a treat to have you on again. And to our listeners, we thank you for sharing this space with us. We look forward to hearing more about some of the challenges that you're facing at work and how that translates into the experience that you are journeying on. You are listening to Leadership Beyond the Title. We will see you on our next episode.
If you found even the smallest nugget of wisdom in this episode, share it with a friend and your friend will thank you. Let's continue the conversation with like-minded leaders and join us on Facebook at Go Flip the Script. Until next time, I challenge you to incorporate what you learned today to evolve your leadership impact.